As you know, we have started this year with $2 billion from the Gulf Fund to straighten our economy. Next year, we shall be having about the same amount until 1980. After that, our economy will be, quite solid for the takeoff. So I'm not dreaming at all. I'm not speaking from hopes or dreams, not at all. I'm speaking, I'm always, telling my people the truth and what we can do. We were backward. So I'm trying my best to reconstruct. And believe me, I'm starting from zero. How can I build it with such a very high military expenditure? For that, I'm really asking for peace, and I'm working for peace.
The Suez Canal bears many of Sadat's hopes for Egypt. Closed for 8 years by war, it was opened again 2 years ago, the fruit of a limited truce, and a sign for Sadat of what full peace might bring. He requires it to yield $1 billion a year by 1980, with which income and the yield from oil in the Red Sea, he hopes to have Egypt financially afloat within 3 years. But even that income will only help pay off old debts. It can't regenerate the economy, nor redeem the president's promise of a new dawn by the end of this decade. Port Said, evacuated in war, was deserted for 5 years. Now it is back to life, and the city is a symbol of that kind of future for Egypt in which President Sadat has placed his faith. A future which requires a permanent peace with Israel that would allow Port Said to become the Hong Kong of the Middle East. To avoid economic chaos and the social and political upheaval that might cause in Egypt and the Middle East, President Sadat 3 years ago introduced what's now known as the open door policy. Its purpose to offer sufficient inducement to attract massive amounts of Western and Arab capital into Egypt to help stimulate the country's economy. In effect, it was saying to the rest of the world, come here and make money out of Egypt, in the hope that Egypt would make money out of the rest of the world. If it's to work, then the whole of this area around me has got to be filled with new and modern factories. And so far, it must be said, there's precious little evidence that the economic boom promised by the open door will arrive by the date President Sadat has set for it, 1980. 1 or 2 factories are here, more are expected, but foreign capital is cautious. It has arrived in tens of millions when thousands of millions are required to build Sadat's promised land. Not that foreigners after a fat profit can't get rich quick. The Port Said market is a tribute to them. Passing through the open door, they sell here cheap goods at knockdown prices, neatly wrapped junk, making money for middlemen and deepening the balance of payments crisis. The allure of foreign labels tempting more and more Egyptians to buy here what they could better produce themselves. In the chaos of Cairo, it's not hard to spot who benefits from the open door. Foreign cars, imported at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, even £80,000 apiece. Elegant boutiques selling fine clothes to rich women at prices which would buy a poor man food for a year. The economy benefits not at all. Some of the rich flaunt their wealth lavishly. Many traders, merchants, property developers and middlemen, not enough industrialists. They spend on an evening's entertainment what would cost a worker 10 years' labour. Nor are they unduly sensitive to the feelings of those masses to whom the open door has yet to offer consolation. At the Gezira Club, in the centre of Cairo, gather those around whom President Sadat evidently hopes to construct his new society. The middle class, restrained under Nasser from conspicuous consumption, are now free to prosper. But they have yet to demonstrate that their part in the new Egypt will benefit the nation as well as themselves. The more sensitive among them are uncomfortably aware that a dangerous gulf now exists between them and the mass of the people. Knowing that, they still relish their new freedom.
We are starting again to feel that this is the country where we belong. This is the country where we will find our security. This is the country where we'll find our chance to develop as persons and as a people. For more than 15 years, we had, as businessmen, we had to move out of the country because we didn't have the chance to operate here. And then as soon as the government decided to adopt this open door policy, we decided to return back here. We decided to take our chance here. And I believe there's no great risk involved.
Leila, what effect has the open door policy had on your life?
When companies come into the country, there's more opportunities for people who are qualified to get better jobs. And say the upper middle class and the middle class are qualified people for these companies, and the companies are paying very good or good salaries. So people get better opportunity, and being from the middle or upper middle class, we get these better opportunities, and the standard of living for us becomes better.
Isn't one of the problems that in order to build up the country in the way in which this government has decided to do it, you actually need to have entrepreneurs, and the entrepreneurs are lacking?
Yes, definitely. This is the problem that we are facing today.
Is that because they can make easier money elsewhere, basically?
Definitely. Whether it's internal, local investments or foreign investments. And I believe this is really the major problem Egypt is facing today.
How do you think, Leila, that people who, for instance, see the big weddings in the Sheraton, the big cars, how do you worry about how they might perceive that, what they might think about that?
Do I worry about that? Yes, I worry about that. But how they see it, I'm sure that they don't. They wonder how so much money can be spent on one night, say, or one day. But I think this is the fact of life everywhere and all over the world. You find some people who can afford to do many things extravagantly and some people who can't afford it.
If I find myself not capable to convince my people, I shall resign. I shall leave my place to another one. But I shall never go back on democracy. In the rights of 18th and 19th of January, those very small elements, they have exploited the riffraff to burn Cairo.
You talk about riffraff. Scores of people were killed in January.
Yes, riffraff. Yes, riffraff.
Not the people.
Well, they were riffraff. There has been very few numbers of communists and Nasrites that has been paid by Gaddafi to start this. And they used to start it and flee before the police comes. When the police comes, he finds the riffraff only.
Does it worry you that it appears that as a result of the open door policy, a few people are getting very rich indeed, while the majority, the mass of the people, are enjoying no benefit at all? Is that something that worries you, disturbs you at all?
Not at all. This is a mere propaganda of the critics here. And this is really communist propaganda mainly. They are trying to exploit the difficulties that we are in. We are in a very tight economic position.
If you do get, again, social upheaval like you had in January, would you then stop the democratic trend that you've been developing?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm for democracy. I'm having in the application now grave faults. My newspapers, if you read it in the last December and January, Nothing except criticism, as if nothing has been achieved in this country. Because after free press, and it came after 40 years, after 40 years of non-free press, they came to be free. They thought that criticizing everything is freedom.
The editorial meeting in the newsroom of Al-Ahram, the most famous paper in the Middle East. The wild freedom that Sadat perceives here is less evident to the outsider. True, there's no longer a censor at this desk, but the editor is appointed personally by Sadat. And those journalists who oppose the paper's line allege that their editor is no more free from the president than they were from the censor. The charge is denied.
We are free to write whatever we want. We are free to express our views as much as we want. There is nobody to say, no, don't publish this or publish this.
Can you give me an example of how you do differ or might differ from President Sadat on, say, foreign policy?
You know, concerning the foreign policy, I don't think we have any differences with the President Sadat's policy. Maybe we differ on some internal policies, but I don't think there is any difference in our views concerning the foreign policy.
If you found yourself in total disagreement with government policy and expressed your disagreement in the paper on a major issue of foreign policy, would you expect to be in your job very long?
I can object to anything I see, as long as I'm expressing my views, my personal views in the right way. Of course, I can freely express this anytime.
There is more freedom and more readiness to assert it. At this political rally, the audience chants slogans. The ministers live in palaces, the people in hovels. And the protest is permitted. Yet democracy is hardly bursting out all over. There are 3 parties, each of which may organize and campaign. But that means less than it might appear. Framed pointedly by portraits not of Sadat but Nasser, the leader of the left-wing party, Khaled Mohiuddin, attacks the government but carefully refrains from mention of Sadat. Mohiuddin is a Marxist who believes that the open door is doomed to produce a rich elite which will squander the nation's wealth. And he may say this, but only to a handful. He's barred from radio and television, has no newspaper, and in Al-Ahram is vilified almost as an enemy of the state. Would it be normal for people to say the kind of things that they were saying at that meeting, that the ministers live in palaces, we live in slums, that the rich are getting fat while we're getting thin, those kind of expressions of
No,
of
it is new expressions, of course. This is, of course, the result of some freedom, and also the result that life became difficult. Before, the difference was not so great between the rich and poor. Or the people themselves do not feel that there are big differences. But now the people feel there is big differences.
Are you free yourself to criticize President Sadat himself? As a leader, as a man, as a politician?
I criticize the policy only. I don't criticize the man. No need to criticize the man, you know. We always put Mr. Sadat outside criticism. We are afraid of criticizing him, but he is a symbol of the state, and we prefer to criticize the government who are carrying on the policy.
In the present economic crisis, do you believe that the movement towards democracy can go any further, or has it now reached its ultimate point?
We are pessimistic about the future of democracy because we don't think that the economic crisis will be solved in a few years.
As yet, the issue of democracy barely touches the lives of most of the people. Their permanent obsession is to remain safely this side of hunger, the insistent needs of survival belying the inner turmoil that troubles Egypt. But the trauma of the January riots touched Egypt deeply. The upheaval was a symptom of profound unrest, an assertion of the moral right to rebel. And if the open door persists in rewarding the rich while denying the poor, reason suggests that revolt should recur. But this is Egypt, always patient. Yet, surely there's something they signal. Perhaps not. The president is unalarmed.
What causes anxiety to me really is that as a result of the application of our old socialist system, and it was 100% Marxism, has created hatred among my people. And this is the most difficult problem that I am facing. Politically, you know what I have done all over the world. Economically, I'm doing the same. Militarily, I have done the same. Something very difficult I'm always telling my people, and this is hatred. This is against our tradition in our country here. I'm now really telling my people about it, and I am fighting it very vehemently.
Do you not feel that a revolution here is possible?
That is what the communists and those who lost their power during Nasser time, they are preaching. No, there will be no revolution here.
Mr. President, you sound a very confident man.
Right, right. I'm always confident. It is part of my upbringing in the village.